Now then, new housing figures show the number of new homes in England has fallen during Labour's first year in office, but planning applications to build more have increased over the past 6 months. Before last year's general election, Labour promised to build 1.5 million new homes in England within 5 years, so by the end of this Parliament. And the Housing Secretary, Angela Rayner, says there are no excuses to not meet that target. Here she is speaking to Laura Kunsberg back in February.
I knew it was going to be really difficult. We could see the trend, what was happening. And when I became Secretary of State, I think within the first month, I was asked, do you want to review what you said in your manifesto around the 1.5 million homes? And
you considered ditching your target as soon as you got in?
Well, people had said, Angela, this target, when we got into government and we saw the trend was going backwards. So not only was you having to reverse the trend, but then push ahead. So we felt that it made it even more challenging, but I wasn't going to give up on the target.
There she goes. So what do the numbers mean and how realistic is that 1.5 million target? BBC Verify's Ben Chu joins us in the studio. Hello.
Hello, Claire.
Welcome. Simply put, the number of new homes in England fell during Labour's first year in office. Applications to build more rose over the past 6 months. So swings and roundabouts, really, but we don't still have that rise that they promised.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's been a disappointing first year in terms of actual homes being built. And we should say at Verify, what we're tracking here is something quite specific. It's the number of new houses in England which are being given energy performance certificates. So every new home has to have one of those. And housing experts we've talked to say this is really the best leading indicator. That's your best steer on how many new homes are being delivered. The official statistics on net additional dwellings, which is the official target, that doesn't come out until later in the year. So we're trying to get ahead of that. And what we've looked at these figures, which the latest ones came out today, for the first full year of Labour's time in power, they delivered about 200,000 new homes, roughly, we think. To get to the 1.5 million target over 5 years, that implies around 300,000 a year. So you can see quite some way off that rate. Now, in fairness, the government says that they were always going to build up to the target. They weren't going to be hitting that 300,000 in year one. So there's a chance they may still get there. But the fact that it's gone down actually in the first year relative to the last year, that just shows you how much more rapidly they're going to have to scale up over the next years to get to have any hope of hitting that overall target.
How is it affecting the number of affordable houses? Because this was a big part of their pledge as well, wasn't it?
So they've pledged in the spending review to give around £39 billion over 10 years to affordable housing. So that will be helping, that's about 3-4 billion a year, although a lot of that spending doesn't come in until quite late in the Parliament and a lot in the next Parliament. So that will help, but some housing experts would say it's not. They should bring forward some of that spending because the public social housing element of this is really important because private developers, private house building developers are really squeezed because houses are still quite unaffordable to a lot of people. Interest rates are still quite high. So all this really underlines the scale of the challenge they're going to have if they're going to reach that target.
And more widely, a lot of Labour's economic long-term plan was built on growth and was built on building and infrastructure and how all of that feeds into a wealthier economy. So if this is stuttering, what kind of sign is that for their wider agenda? Well,
economists would say that housing is really important, actually, for growth. It enables people to move to places where they can be more productive, where they can do better jobs. If there's not that housing supply in areas which are really productive around cities, then you're gonna feel it in terms of overall growth. So I think the government does understand that. It's important to say they are putting through some quite major planning reforms as well, and that should help deliver more housing over time. The issue is how quickly is that effect going to be felt? And how quickly can that new housing be delivered? These stats today, as we've been saying, really just show how big a hole the sector is really in and how much work it's going to be to dig them out of it.
Is it possible? Have they overpromised? What do you think?
Well, a lot of housing experts are really sceptical that they're going to get there just because of the scale of the challenge. But, you have to have what the government would call a stretch target. Otherwise, you're going to underperform again and again.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us. That's the BBC Verify's Ben Chu.
Let's have a word with Rico Wojtulewicz, who is Head of Policy and Market Insight at the National Federation of Builders. Hello, Rico.
How are you?
Hi. We've spoken in the past, and I doubt you'll be hugely surprised at these figures. But just in terms of what our correspondent Ben was talking about there, in terms of the challenge of scaling up that is facing the government here, how genuinely deliverable at this point, a year into the Parliament, do you think that 1.5 million target is?
Not deliverable.
Okay.
Look, one thing Ben didn't mention is actually, if you look at how the planning system works and how homes come forward, technically you're still in a Conservative government in terms of housing, because on a site of, say, 50 homes, it can take 18 months to get planning, and then it might take you another 9 to 18 months to sign all the conditions off, which means you can actually finish the project off. So this is a massive lag. So the government were always going to have this problem where in the first few years, the planning permissions that were gained under the last government were being built out.
So it's still the same ones going through ultimately, yeah.
Yeah, and if I'm honest, I think they're really talking a good game. They've put some really amazing, like generational stuff that just every politician was scared to do. But they have been quite reliant on the big builders, and they're the ones where perhaps are going to be the slowest to build out. If from the outset they were really, really focused on the smaller builders, in that first year you would have got more projects getting started. They have done that now, but it's kind of prioritisation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, clearly it probably makes more sense, doesn't it, to concentrate on the big developers? And I suppose my question then is, how interested do you find they are in meeting the levels the government is looking at? You know, how much buy-in will they get from the big house builders? We're talking about the locations, the type of housing, and importantly, the infrastructure that's needed around those developments as well to make those proper communities.
Well, I would argue no, it's not more important, because we need them. They're important, and they have a lot of planning applications already in the system. It's more important to have competition in the market to enable, self-build, community land trust, social housing, registered providers like housing associations, and your small market builders, because they're the ones that don't build perhaps in like the cities, and they're the ones that are more likely. So actually, they are really important. But there's a secondary element here. If you reform planning for housing, and that means enabling more SME builders, because now you've reduced the risk, it's more easy to get those infrastructure projects over the line, because they also take a long time. And because SMEs, small and medium-sized house builders, are all constructors, train 8 in 10 construction apprentices, if you don't focus on them on the outset, you then don't get enough workers coming through the system.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because that's been a big problem, wasn't it? I think it was a while ago we were talking about the construction industry lacking about 150,000 workers. There's obviously those apprenticeships going on. Can you see that changing around you or not, in terms of the number of people coming into the industry?
Yeah, we really can.
Right.
And there are fewer people being directly employed, and that's a problem, because it's harder to upskill someone, and it's almost like not a career trajectory. If you're doing job by job by job, it's harder to kind of improve as an individual, or find a new thing that you might be better at. So a lot of people start in, say, house building, and then end up doing kind of renovations or retrofitting works, or go the other way around. So it's a difficult one, and actually it's the tax changes to national insurance that have created a lot more complications for that, and that is an issue, because that impacts the smaller companies the most, because they also directly employ the most. And we don't have enough people coming through the system.
So we haven't, or we have? Because I thought you gave the answer that we have, but you're saying we haven't.
No, we don't have enough people coming through. Right. And that's again, because when you have an apprentice, they need somebody to train them on the job. And if that's small companies and they're leaving the sector, which they are, it's harder. What I will say is the government have worked with CITB, the Construction Industry Training Board, and they've got around a table and had a conversation about how they improve things.
Because the other one, just very quickly, if you could, was planning officers, wasn't it? Because there was a shortage of planning officers too. Are there more of those coming through or not? Because that's obviously a critical part of all of this.
A small amount, not enough. Also building control officers. But the thing about planning is, look, we're going to need more of them, and they are really important. And actually, they get blamed for stuff when it's not their fault. Other people have to sign things off, and then they get the blame. We don't often talk about that. Right. But the government can make the system easier, so they don't have to use as many planner resources on projects, so with design guides and stuff like that. So if they hurry up that element, then actually that would take the pressure off planners. But we still haven't got enough. We still need to train many of them.
All right, Rico, thanks very much indeed for that. Rico Wojtulewicz, who is Head of Policy and Market Insight at the National Federation of Builders.